and the people
Sorry
lack
to interrupt the
confidence
honourable
in it.
member. His time has expired. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, this is a bill on which there's been a debate on the substance, and I think it was clear during that debate that it had the lukewarm support of the Labour Party. I just want to tell members, lukewarm, Mr Speaker, because while the ATI may or may not, the new institute may or may not be a good thing, there's a question raised about whether the legislation is necessary or not. Mr Speaker, given the lukewarm nature of it, but the fact that all parties other than New Zealand First were supportive, one would have thought that the government would tend the process to garner the support and to try and get a degree of unanimity around the legislation and around the process. But what do we have here, Mr Speaker? We have a government that wants to ride roughshod to build up something which they say is going to be important for decades to come, Mr Speaker. And what they are doing is that they are changing the process that would normally occur in order to rush this through the system. Now, Mr Speaker, I think it's important that if we're building something around which there is consensus, that we should, as far as is possible, have consensus around the process. Because then we can focus on the substance of the legislation rather than on the process, as we will now be doing and as will occur in the truncated select committee process. Mr Speaker, I indicated in the earlier debate, I represent hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists, if we take a broad definition, especially in the information science area. Mr Speaker, many of those people will want to make submissions. But, Mr Speaker, most of those people have something else to do. It's called jobs. Many of them are self-employed. Many of them are employed in small businesses. Some of them are employed in CRIs. Some will be employed in universities and technical institutes. Those people know a lot about this area, and they will want to make submissions. Mr Speaker, I'm told that the normal process by my colleague Ruth Dyson is that there is normally a 6-week period that Parliament sets. It's a standard period, is 6 weeks for submissions to come back. The committee meets and there's 6 weeks. Well, if the committee meets next week and there's a 6-week period for submissions to come back, that leaves no time whatsoever in order to hear those submissions. And that, Mr Speaker, is an absolute disgrace. Now, my colleague David Cunliffe, I'm just going to sort of disagree with him a little bit. He said that it run. No, I've never done that before. Never done that before. It said that we're running roughshod over the Parliament. Well, Mr Speaker, in a way that's true, but it's not the real issue. What we are doing here is we are running roughshod over the people of New Zealand, over the stakeholders, over the businesses who have an interest in this and an interest in getting it right. Mr Speaker, we have had feedback that the rapid process that is being used here and has been used previously around the abolition of credits has caused major damage to New Zealand business. And why should we repeat the process that caused that much damage in this bill? I want to make another point, and that is the question of travel. I sit on the Business Committee, and it is very, very rare for us not to come to an agreement around the ability of committees to travel to hear submissions. We think it is a good thing, taking the Parliament out to the people. But, Mr. Speaker, we do it by agreement. We do it by the parties getting together in the Business Committee and saying, this is a good thing to do for this committee, there's enough notice, people are of agreement, there's enough submissions in that area, good on them. Get them out there talking to the people. What we don't like, and what is not good parliamentary politics, is to have a minister saying, we're telling you what to do, Select Committee, and a whole pile of monkeys opposite voting for that minister, for that approach. Mr. Speaker, that is not acceptable. That is not an acceptable approach to running a parliament in a positive manner. That is not an approach that should happen. There are some other things. Meeting during the day, and you know, Mr. Speaker, committees can, and with the support of the Business Committee, often make decisions to sit during the day when Parliament's been sitting and where something is urgent. If something is urgent, if something is really urgent, then the Parliament has its systems for dealing with it and dealing with these issues responsibly. But, Mr. Speaker, what we have here, and I frankly do not understand the reasoning of the government, why they want to burn off opposition support, albeit lukewarm, for a bill by running this sort of process. There are other things. I mean, Business Committee members are, without sharing too widely what happens at Business Committee, because it's generally confidential, but I think people are allowed to say what they say or quote themselves. I get damned annoyed with select committees that regard recesses as holidays and don't meet. I get damned annoyed with lazy government members who do not meet in the recesses, regard them as holidays, Mr. Speaker, and then come to this House and tell members that are not allowed to come to the chamber, that they're banned from the chamber, that there's almost, Mr. Speaker, come so close. If there wasn't a motion of the House, it would be a breach of privilege. Having select committees meeting at this time, Mr. Speaker, when the House is sitting, when, Mr. Speaker, lazy government members have not been prepared to meet in the recess. Mr. Speaker, I hope the member does remember that fact, and I hope the member is also a member who stands up for the Parliament and the people of New Zealand. What's that one's name? What's his name? Mike Sabin. I want Mike Sabin to stand up after me and say that he is standing up for his constituents. I don't know how much science they do in Northland. No, I do. They actually do some quite interesting science up in Northland. But I want him to say that his constituents are going to get a fair shot at making a submission on this bill. That they're going to get, if not 6 weeks, 4 weeks to prepare a submission. I think they should be allowed at least 4 weeks to prepare a submission, and then if there's enough submissions from Northland, I think the committee should go up there, preferably in the recess, and should deal with it. And if we did this properly, and maybe even worked it around Waitangi, the committee could meet there and at almost no additional travel costs, because most members are up there, and report the bill back, Mr. Speaker, at the appropriate time, early in the new year, and hopefully, Mr. Speaker, what I'm hoping for, it could be dealt with in a positive way. It could be dealt with in a positive way and we could end up supporting it. Because what's going to happen, Mr Speaker, if they ride roughshod over the people of New Zealand, we will end up opposing this legislation to the closure.
David Clendon.